From America, this is the Adult Swim Podcast, Rick and Morty Companion Edition. I'm Matt Harrigan, with me, Maxime Simonet. We're talking about Rick and Morty number 406. Don't get it mixed up. Last week was 407. This is 406. Promortyus, right, Max?
Yep, that's the one. That's what I told you since the beginning, Matt, and I'm so excited for you to say it.
I said it already. If you haven't watched it yet, listener, you might want to watch it first. We're going to get some spoilers here. Talking with some folks who made the episode. Michelle Rhee, background designer of this episode.
Hi.
Kendra Melton is a character designer. Correct me if I'm wrong. Brian Newton directed it.
Yeah.
Jeff Loveness wrote it. They're all here now.
Oh.
Call and ask your questions, 708-794-6386. Here we go. Welcome, guys.
Hey, good to see you.
Hey.
Yo.
Promortyus. The one of the reviews I read said, Rick and Morty plays around with its story structure again. But this time you can understand what's going on. What do you think? Tell me about it. Tell us about it. Time jumps. Start us off, somebody.
Oh, yeah. It came from a place of, we wanted to, we famously, story circle stuff, Dan Harmon style, Joseph Campbell stuff. We don't do a lot of, non-linear stuff. And so we tried to think of a story idea that would facilitate that. And I don't know, it just came from a place of, we wanted to do, a Memento or a Rashomon, a little bit of Citizen Kane, or, Dude, Where's My Car, Hangover. And we thought, doing, an alien parasite would be a funny way of getting into that. And that seemed to justify doing, time jumps and stuff. But, yeah, it was just something we'd had in the back pocket for a while, and we'd loved this DC Comics villain called Starro. That was the basis of it. We just wanted to make fun of Starro, and it grew from that. I think it grew you guys go ahead. Sorry.
Is this the royal we, or is this just you, Jeff?
It was something Mike McMahon. I had seen a Batman Beyond episode when I was a kid. There was this Batman Beyond episode where Starro's on Superman for 10 years, and just the thought of hold on, what has Superman been doing for 10 years with that thing on? That's basically
it's interesting. They kind of use that premise in the Young Justice, I think, season 1.
Oh, no way. Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
Watch
I love
Young Justice.
Starro.
Good show.
I thought there was so much satire to have, and I talked too much in the last podcast, so I'll shut up. But there was so much satire to be had, and do facehuggers have their own yearnings and dreams, and they're always just such the bad guys, but we thought we'd give them their own little vignette in the middle of that. But yeah, it just came from a place of wanting to fuck around with non-linear storytelling.
Before we started, we were setting audio and getting ready and stuff, and you guys were talking about the time jumps, and you were talking about how many rebreaks you did. Walk us through what's a rebreak.
A rebreak happens a lot at Rick and Morty. I think we rebreak it, once it's gone to art, but before it even goes to art, we rebreak it in the room.
The story.
Times. Yeah, the story. It's a way of there are certain beats we try to hit, try to make sure we're on structure, trying to make sure, it's a lot of trial and error to see what characters are working. Is Jerry's story about flying? Are we hitting the right beats there? Are we playing a game where we're doing some anti-beats, the cat stuff? Glorzo was we played around a lot with it, and at first we didn't go back to the home planet for a while. I don't know, these things go through 10 different versions, but
and I can tell you the version we got when we started on the board, which was the first half of the script was the initial Rick and Morty wake up under the Glorzo and have to figure out what's going on, and that was literally the first half. They get back to Earth, and they're Beth asks, "Where's Summer?" And they're like, "Oh shit." And they have to go all the way back. You guys hadn't finished rewriting that last half of it. And I remember one part of it was they come back and Summer's just waiting there, and they have to retell Summer's tale. And then there's another part, if you remember the Nazis, Rick basically inspires with his YouTube channels, inspires all the Glorzos to turn alt-right Nazis.
Yeah. It was a thing of Rick accidentally dug his own grave because his Glorzo became a piece of shit, that's sort of in there, but we dialed it back.
And then I think that version also had the actual 9/11.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I guess the truth should come out here. I have to confess. Yeah, there was a I think that the earliest version of the script, they did actually do 9/11 because this was the only time they'd be able to get away with it guilt-free. And I think on the art side of things, you guys said, I mean, rightfully so, it was too bleak.
We have a couple of board artists who, some of them are from New York, who are like, I don't feel comfortable working on this.
Oh,
wow!
For that reason.
So there was a protest internally.
It was a big deal. It's just kind of a concern.
I think we actually had someone on our team specifically who actually was like, no, it's totally fine. And they had gone through it and their family had gone through it. So I think there was kind of like a split decision on that one.
I never knew that. Oh, yeah. And from the writing point of view, we had a long debate, like, because it came from this place of like Star Wars violence or Marvel movie violence. Where, like,
the point of it's clear is that they're being complete assholes.
Yeah.
That they're like disregarding these people's lives because they're like devaluing.
Yeah.
Like bubble wrap.
Exactly. Oh man, but yeah, we went through so many, and then we had the debate in the writers' room of like, okay, what's the right line? I'm like, okay, 9/11's too soon, but what if we subvert that and go with Pearl Harbor? Like, it was a lot of debate.
You had a too soon conversation about 9/11.
Yeah. We had a lot of 9/11 talks in the room. This might make it onto the show. I don't know if I should. We had one in Snakes. In the Snakes episode, we were going to do a 9/11 beat where they had ruined time so much that accidentally Abraham Lincoln's snake was saved from being assassinated, but he went through a time quake. It's like Lincoln accidentally did 9/11. I think was a joke that we had. And like that was the only way to fix the time stream, was to make Snake Lincoln do Snake 9/11. But yeah, we've gone through 9/11.
I can tell you, when the writers' room or everyone gets stuck on a tangent, it permeates the whole show. Because how many times did Nazis get mentioned this one season?
A lot of Nazis and cum gutters. I think this is the season of Nazis and cum gutters.
Is great. Yeah.
You're on the line with the Rick and Morty Companion Podcast, talking about the Academy Award-winning film Parasite. What's your question?
Hi. I was wondering, when coming up with a character concept, do you usually traditional sketch, or is like everything digital?
We always do everything on a Cintiq nowadays, so everything's digital. We work within Photoshop. Sometimes we'll use the animation timeline if we have like a really fancy special pose. For Glorzo specifically, we had parts where, they're birthing, they're getting impregnated, whatever, all of that stuff. And we had to actually design each of those poses, where this guy's just like losing his ass, basically. It was just like, so we use Photoshop very thoroughly on the show with our Cintiqs.
Cool.
Did you like that answer, caller?
Thank you. Yes, I did. Thank you.
Thanks for your call. How about those anime robot suits? Walk us, how did those come through?
I mean, a bunch of people just roughed out some concepts. And then
and how they were... Oh yeah, there's Gundam reference in there too.
I think I missed something.
Yeah, I think you broke up a little, Brian. I'm so sorry. I couldn't hear you.
It's okay. I'm bad at internet. At one point the Glorzos do transform into giant monsters in the early draft.
I don't remember that. Oh wow, my mind has been turned.
Because initially, another reference, I remember we talked about this. It was going to be Last of Us, that it's like a parasite, and they slowly like transform. Yeah, and so at one point they were going to be like full like fungoid monsters.
That's right. Yeah,
they gestate into the eggs.
That's right. We went. I'm so sorry to the art team. We made you. Yeah, we were going to have more steps, and then we simplified it from where like, they just get the fin and they shit the egg. It was going to be they get the face, then it goes through the basic xenomorph, like they burst out and they're carrying the bodies and they become a monster. But that seemed to we thought, no, make it dumber. Make it like they're just like this hive mind thing that shits eggs and like Summer breaks it open. Yeah. But you guys, I mean, you really. Your art I feel so bad that we made you re-break so many times because you did such good work every step.
That's Michelle, our entire life on this show. Don't worry about it.
Michelle, is this a hard show for you as a background designer? I mean, what a beautiful, intense episode. Is this harder than normal for you, this one?
Or is it rewarding?
I would say this episode was the hardest one of the season, but it was definitely rewarding. Seeing it come out at the end, Yeah, because we just had so many, like the cold open was super crazy, and just doing all those pans for that was a lot of fun, and but people definitely broke their backs for this episode. So
well, and I think a lot of those backgrounds came in on the tail end on top of that, like, you know, as they break and re-break and like there's a bunch of new additions. I think a lot of those pans came in towards kind of the end, right, Michelle?
Yeah, it was, we pretty much had to take a break for a little bit and then just kind of reassess and then go back on.
What do you mean you had to take a break?
With the re-breaks, we have a lot of time. There's just time that takes in between these backgrounds, so you pretty much need to wait until things are approved, and then you can start working on these again, just to be a little bit more efficient with background.
What triggers a re-break? Is it you guys just decide to pivot the story? It's not going where you want it to go?
I'd say it comes from like probably Dan and Justin. Like they're kind of the final voice in this stuff. Like, yeah, like you can write a draft, but then like you've got Dan in the final edit bay after boards or whatever, and then like you have Justin who's so improvisational, and so like you can have half the episode, you can have the back half rewritten by the time it comes back. So like there's so much re-breaking, but then I'd say most of the changes, would you guys agree, kind of come from that final round with like Justin and Dan where they really shake stuff up. And
yeah, it's where they're fine-tuning everything.
Yeah, they put their own voice into it.
Yeah, especially since they're not always there with us on the launch. So we kind of go off on our own until they look at it and say, hey, we had these ideas. I'm like, oh, I wish you were there from the beginning.
So you guys start without them.
We put some of that into Glorzo. We put some of that in. I tried to channel some of our frustrations through that one guy.
I read that part of the script. I'm like, that's totally Dan's voice right there.
Glorzo is Dan at the beginning of this episode.
No, Glorzo is Peace.
No, it's Dan.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, and Dan's not Peace. It's that one line that Morty has when he's chastising one of the Glorzos about changing the plan to invade send Glorzos to Earth. And he's just like, I didn't know it was just, I'm just telling you, do your fucking job. You didn't look real busy. That kind of thing. I'm like, I've never heard Dan say that, but I can totally imagine Dan saying that.
It came from a place of I wrote that was a very organic place that came from. I tried to side on the side of the art people for that one.
We're here talking to the crew behind Rick and Morty number 406, Promortyus.
You're on the line with us talking about this one. Why don't you tell us what you heard about it?
I just want to know, where did Jerry beekeeping come from, and why does that make Jerry insanely more fuckable?
Right. This comes specifically from a writer of ours called James Siciliano, who I think wrote it's going to be episode 9 or something, and he wrote Space Snakes. He was on draft of that. He got really into beekeeping, and he thought it was the funniest goddamn thing in the world. He just became obsessed with beekeeping, and he knows so much. And we all thought in the writer's room, it's so rare in the modern age for someone just to have a tangible analog skill. And we thought, this is the sexiest thing in the world. Just James knows about bees, man, and like he's just on top of it. And I think I threw the bees thing in there as the biggest toss away. I think there was a version where Jerry died from the bees.
We weren't going to talk about that.
Oh no, there was going to be a tag where like Jerry, everything's the same. Oh no, did I ruin it? Like they come back, like that whole adventure happened, and they look outside, and Jerry has been eaten by his own bees. That was
we bordered that.
Yeah.
I mean, now that the cat's out of the bag, like I love that part. I love the thought of Jerry just dying over and over, and us just having to do that. But yeah.
But like the way you guys revealed in the script, if I remember, is like we don't see Jerry die. We just find out like Jerry suddenly has a lizard tongue.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, because Rick saw the body, and like Rick replaced Jerry, but like the joke was that like he's run out of replaceable Jerrys, so now they're all like this Jerry had a lizard tongue, but he's like, well, like we're scraping the bottom of the barrel of Jerry's. But I think the fuckable thing, that must have been, I think Dan or Justin, I don't think I wrote the fuckable thing, so they must have, they like bees, and they gave Jerry a win. But it's all from James Siciliano, being a fuckable beekeeper.
Siciliano.
I'm gonna have to bother him about that later.
Please do. Yeah, please do.
Oh, Matt, you go.
Max.
No, I'll go. When talking about the backgrounds before the show, Michelle, and those big pans, you're talking about almost the lore that's written in the setting visually, more than even said. That there's layers upon layers of the parasite existing on top of another civilization you almost have to invent. How much do you get to just invent that and have a proof of concept of like, this is a world you want to see?
We had a lot of concepts from our art director, James McDermott, as well as some of the background designers, like background leads, like Robbie Irwin and Vincent Vance. But we pretty much, the idea was that it was originally an old mining alien planet that had been taken over by the Glorzos. And so when looking into how James was designing these mining designs, I was actually looking into a game that my husband really likes and Robbie really likes, which is Destiny. And a lot of those designs actually went into what was the base of the Glorzo planet, and then putting on top of that, I really liked how James was thinking of this mucousy kind of membrane circling around. So I was thinking about like octopus egg sacs, or kind of placing these big like egg sacs around the whole place. And then it was a lot of fun just thinking about mixing Destiny with Star Wars for the base of the planet and putting those memories on top of it, and just showing more history of what that planet looked like before Rick and Morty pretty much fucked it all up.
Well, interestingly enough, and this is an unintentional parallel my mind drew. We were talking about the beekeepers. There was something up, so the world felt so richly drenched in honey almost, which made me think of like a giant hive.
It's like a hive of aliens.
Yeah. Which was an intentional parallel, or is that one of those just fun things you accidentally find?
Oh man, I don't know how much we can say. There was a whole beekeeping script that we had that we lost, of like Jerry's bees go out of control and take over the world and stuff. I don't know. There have been many versions of this stuff. But I mean, yeah, I'll let the art people. You guys are far more knowledgeable than I am. But just drippy mucus stuff.
Oh, I remember one conceit was, even initially in the board phase, that the Glorzo planet was literally like an asteroid that was used as a construction base, and then literally the Glorzos attached themselves to this construction planet. So it was a space on top of technology on top of Glorzo tech. I think that was always the conceit behind how we initially did the boards, and then background took it where it needed to go because we suck, or at least I suck.
I think, I don't really think we were thinking about that connection, but definitely the paint is what made it feel more like honey. Yeah, the paint department really had a fun time, I think, painting this episode.
Yeah, the color always helps all of our artwork sing. So, you can never appreciate the color artist. Every part of the process really matters. And, we're very fortunate to have such a strong team on every level.
It's wild, color in particular.
Yeah.
I write comic books as well, and it's always it's like that when the color comes in, it makes it really just come alive for the first time. I mean, it's such a magical process every step of the way.
You're on the line with the Rick and Morty Companion Podcast, talking about honey traps, talking about Honey Boy, the new movie.
Go ahead. What's your question?
Hi. I'm Mark. I'm an animator. I'm wondering, this is kind of a question for Jeff specifically, but I'd love to hear everyone else's takes. As a screenwriter, do you have any advice on starting like a writing practice for someone who wants to generate more ideas for animations, I guess specifically? Like, do you have a practice outside of Rick and Morty? And do you have any? I'm trying to write more, and I'd like advice. I love Dan Harmon's Story Circle and stuff like that. So
No, any advice? And yeah, the art people feel free to chime in. It sounds like you've got two good options where you're a writer and an animator. So I would say, I didn't get my start in animation. I got my start more in like live action comedy. But I would say just try to make stuff with your friends and try to make short form stuff, like a short film to kind of show off your style, I guess. Like when I was younger, I made like short films and I put them up on YouTube and I would share them around. On the writing side of things, I would say just get into a good daily cycle. Try to write, whatever's comfortable for you. If it's 5 pages a day, if it's 2 pages a day, just try to build something until it's done. And I don't know, like maybe on the art side, you guys can give more advice of but just try to build your own specific voice and practice it over time. Realize that the first couple things you make might not be the best, but keep with it and try to hone down on your voice. It'll take a couple tries, but I think consistency is the key, and try to find your own voice both vocally and comedically, but then also through the animation side. Maybe you guys can give advice here. I'll defer to the animation and art.
Yeah.
Well, depending on what video games your boyfriend's playing, you might get some great ideas.
Right.
But I would definitely echo his sentiment, though. Finishing projects is most important.
Yeah.
You need to learn how to wrap things up. That's like the hardest part in the entire industry. A lot of people fail on Act C. Everyone needs to learn how to. Everyone needs to learn how to end their story properly. So I'm just going to echo the same thing Jeff is saying. Is basically, if you want to keep pitching, you want to create new content, you need to find your voice, because we've all lived a different life. We all have different experiences, and you need to draw from that, and then that will make you better and more sellable, because you're selling yourself to the company, whether you're trying to be in a writer room with Jeff or you're on the animation end. Either way, you're bringing something special from you, and no one can be you. So what do you bring that can make the company money, basically, is where you end up being in that whole situation. But the more you do it, the more you finish. And like he said, short form is actually very the best way to go when you're starting out, because you want to just finish it, get it done, move along, because all of your first stuff is going to be your worst stuff. So you want to get all that bad stuff out of your consciousness the quickest you can. You want to get to the meat, and the better you can get, you'll learn how to refine it as you go. And so the more you finish, the faster you'll get better.
Kendra, this might be a stupid question, but in your background, what's the analog of finishing the story if you were, when you're building a portfolio or training like that?
Well, I mean, if we're specifically talking for character design, so if I was putting together a character portfolio, I'm assuming that's kind of where you're
maybe. I don't know. I told you it might be stupid.
Well, I mean, for character design portfolio, we like to see turnarounds. I mean, we're more of a very different place, but at the same, in the same voice though, you are bringing yourself to those designs. Whatever age you are, whatever you're into, whether it's alt culture, whether it's pop culture, it doesn't matter, because your voice matters. I have friends who could tell you everything about what's going on in pop culture. And then I have other friends that will be like, oh, did you go to that crazy weird party the other day where all these alty people were and everyone had, so all those voices, when you mesh them all together in a room or in a design, it doesn't matter. The different voices matter. Different voices matter. Period. So whatever you can bring that's uniquely you is going to help you. It doesn't matter if it's design, writing, it doesn't matter what part of the process is. You need to bring who you are, because you can't fake it. Once you get there, you have to do a job. And if you don't have something to pull from, you're not going to be able to succeed.
Wow. Yeah, these are amazing answers. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, good luck.
Now call in next week with what you made.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can't wait. Wow.
You guys, as a show, generated a tremendous amount of content and dispose of it. So
Yes.
Yeah.
you don't seem you don't seem precious with stuff, but you're also very particular.
For me personally, I'm from illustration, and so we actually are very much taught it's not your baby. This is not about you. This is about your creator, whoever's in charge of you. You're trying to get them what they want to see. You're just trying to facilitate the creative process to visualize what they need. And so it doesn't matter what the writers or Dan or Jeff or even Brian, you know, whoever needs to see something, I'm just trying to facilitate what they want. Like, it's not about me. And I feel like a lot of artists, especially production artists, which is what we fall into the category of, we're not here for our ego. We're here to just make what they want to see. So, you know, if I have to go through 30 rounds of a drawing to figure out what they need, that's my job. And like, why would I have a problem with that?
And on the writing side, it is an ego thing to where like you have to realize, whereas like you may have pitched an idea, but maybe it's like, what's the best version of the idea? So like the 9/11 thing we were just talking about, like I think I pitched, like that first thing out of the gate was like Rick and Morty do 9/11 because this is the only chance they'll have to do it. Maybe that's a funny joke, like it landed well in the room, but then when we saw it in art, we realized, like visually this is too heavy, so we had to come back and have a discussion about what's the best version of this joke. And then we found what I think is a really funny like third option in there where they bypass 9/11 and do Pearl Harbor. That was not my first draft, and in fact like that took a lot of breaks. So like as a writer on like to supplement the animation side, you might have it. You can be precious about something, but you also have to find the best version of it, and you have to whittle it down and experiment. And like that, this episode was a great example of that. Well, it's a lot of like,
Jeff, in that moment, you do get to have a compromise that lets you at least feel like as though you're one of the germinating seeds in that idea. Are there ways, especially Kendra, since you talk so much about making sure you show yourself as a visual artist and putting yourself into your work and show what you bring to the table, do you manage to find through the countless revisions a way to still feel like you're weaving something that's coming from you and an expression of yourself? Or do you feel sometimes that your job here is almost exclusively for the creators and maybe you have other outlets for your own expression?
I mean, this job is very mentally taxing. So at the end of the day, I'm on Animal Crossing.
That's a form of expression, though, right?
Yeah. So I mean, like, I'm digging, you know, a hidden garden right now, but that's my.
But on the other,
job, you know.
But I remember specifically, like, I think collaboration, especially in these anime, I like to break the auteur theory as much as possible because, like, I remember specifically Brian on this came in with, like, on the idea of, like, the Glorzo love story. Like, Brian came in with a specific idea about, like, the closeness of the shots and, like, the intimacy of it. And, like, I think, as a writer for that last question, like, as much collaboration as you can have, like, hold on to what you love about something, but also open it up to where like everyone's going to add stuff and make it better, and that's the fun of this show.
And I can definitely bridge the two ideas because like I definitely understand and agree with Kendra's position where it's a job and I do a job. You tell me what you want and I do that. But as board artists and in directing, it's also an ego. So it's like we want to present ourselves, our crazed ideas, and how we communicate your story. And so, like, that specific sequence was done by Sam Gray, and she did an amazing job with just that interaction, just making it, like, tense and romantic before they actually start face hugging. So it's like things like that. It's finding the right people to do the right job. But,
we all have our own strengths. It's just like in animation, you know, there's some people that are great with the subtleties and the facial acting and all of those things. Yeah. And then there's other people who are great with like the action and like, oh my God, this guy crashed through a wall. And then,
and the visual language that we can communicate with. Like I remember on the the Meeseeks episode from season 1, like that was my first time working with Juan, and he happened to be my one of my board artists for that episode. And we read the script, we launched the script, and immediately the cold open, we were like, Event Horizon is like, yes, cool, do it. And that's it. That's all you need. We all saw that movie. So it's a shared language. It helps. Yeah.
Jeff, can I hear the difference between how you were picturing it beforehand and then when Sam Gray took it to this next even tighter, intimate level? Because you're like, oh, it sounds like they pushed it somewhere else visually than you expected, but I want to know how that...
I think that's part of the joy. Like they elevate it. Like sometimes in the script, especially our scripts are so dense, you have to be very economical with your word choice and like the action dialogue. So like if we had a phrase, was it like artists go nuts or something? That was in the writers. Like it became a running joke. Maybe it went too far. We're like, sometimes for the economy of the script, if you want to keep that script to 38 pages, you kind of give references, but then you let the animators and the storyboard artists kind of bring their own selves. But I always try to put in lots of references, and I think you lead with emotion because when you say what's happening and you endow it with like what you want the feeling to be. But I'm a words-based person. I'm not the most visual person, so that's where you lean on the board artists and the directors to really like hone in on exactly what you're saying.
Because this happens to be a visual medium, so we have to work in tandem.
Yeah. And like, I mean, like, I can pitch like, oh, it's like this Call Me by Your Name, James Baldwin novel, Giovanni's Room type of thing, and I give like the.
I know James.
Oh, he's the best. Yeah, So I give like the emotional place, maybe a couple of touchstones, but then the art team really elevates it and specifically hones in on like the visuals. It's really fun.
Michelle, were you about to say something earlier and I cut you off?
Oh, no, I was just mentioning how, like, I was just going to go off with what Brian was saying, where we do, especially with backgrounds as well, we like to put a little bit of ourselves into the backgrounds. So depending on which background designer does it, like personally for me, I'm a big fan of the show, so I've been placing a lot of Easter eggs in the background, just secretly.
Is it fun for you to see?
Them, please.
Yeah, tell us some Easter eggs. Because I've seen
What do you got?
there's like YouTube videos that break down the.
I know, and I watch those.
Oh my god! And you're like, yes. Tell us some.
We have.
That's why I miss not doing design. I miss doing Easter eggs.
Like a lot of it is like props in the background, or like some of the posters, or things to call from another episode from the first season. That sort of thing, where it's jokes that are running. I think one was like I had reference from actually Dan Harmon's Community. I forgot what I referenced. Oh, I had referenced the Dan Harmon thing about butts and faces and hands and feet, that sort of thing from the Halloween episode. And so I've been placing it throughout all the backgrounds. So good luck to the fans.
Have all of your Easter eggs been discovered?
No, not yet.
Do you want to give us one exclusive reveal right now?
I can't say.
Give us this time code.
A lot of her eugenics theory. Lot of her, you've got a lot.
Oh, that's what all those.
Scene.
Yeah.
Those phrenology
scene,
pictures in the back.
Give us the scene, if not the actual reference.
There's so many I actually forgot.
He's holding out on us.
There was a guy at Stupid Buddy Animations who threw one of our Fish Center fish secretly in the backgrounds, and I don't think they ever noticed. How many of yours go completely unnoticed by the people who are like overseeing you? Do they comb really fine details and quiz you on each one and tell you to take out some?
Well, sometimes I'll actually reference those shows in the backgrounds as well. So I don't think they noticed it.
Yeah.
Until I guess now that I'm saying it, because I haven't told anybody. I've just told it now.
Dan has never come in and say, "Oh, this Community fucking Glendale thing, you got to cut that out."
No.
That's her exclusive. Michelle sneaking Easter eggs.
That's a big privilege.
I used to do that in background as well. But
Yeah,
that was on
it's
Super
a lot
Jail.
of fun.
On Super Jail.
Yeah, I used to do backgrounds on Super Jail
with
a long time ago. Yep.
Christy wouldn't come in and scream at you?
No, he bought me a glass of wine on my first day.
He said, "You look like an alcoholic."
Yes, basically. No.
Hey, you're on the line with the Rick and Morty Companion Podcast. We're talking about television. What's your question?
Is it me? Am I on?
Yeah, you're on. Sorry. I
It's
put
you.
these callers on in the background for like 8 minutes until we get to a lull in the conversation.
Go ahead.
Right. I didn't want to interrupt. I was enjoying it. I have a background in art too, and I love the Easter eggs when you get to. Anyway, I can gush about how much I love the show. I don't want to take away from it.
Gush about your favorite.
It's probably my
famous
favorite
art
show.
Easter eggs.
Oh, thanks, man.
Your what?
Never mind.
Or
Go ahead.
my favorite?
Go ahead.
Hold
What's
on.
your question?
Yeah,
Well, the only most recent one was the movie. The one that I was going to point out was the movie posters. I really liked all of the upcoming movies when they were flying through. That was such a every single callback in the show is beautiful, so beautiful. I love it. Writing wise, art wise, all of the above. But I guess I was trying to figure out a question to get the most information that I can out of the writers, and it might be a little bit cryptic, but I think they might get a kick out of it. Right? What is the source code of Rick and Morty
Oh,
in
I
your
thought
own
you were
words.
gonna ask about the movie source code, which is a
No,
decent.
no. Like because like it's more than just the formula, right?
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by source
Like,
code? What's the?
So if I were to like start an answer, it would be like every time you add a character, unless like explicitly they are dead, like killed off, then you can revisit it.
Yeah.
So like this makes this like infinitely developable storyline that is just so, I don't know, I love it. It's so much fun. I look forward to every single episode, every single part of every single episode.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's so much fun to work on. What's the source code though? I guess I don't understand the question. Like, what's the formula?
We don't.
Do you have a codex?
Jeff,
What
just
gives
give
you
us
your
the
answers?
source code. Yeah.
Jeff, come on.
Give us the
Like if you're the
fucking source
robot,
code.
come on. We all know you're a robot.
We need open source Rick and Morty.
I'm kidding.
Never know.
Everyone can
The
make
source
it.
code for me, like maybe my version of the answer, and like again, I'm just a writer. Like I'm not Dan, or I'm not
Mhm.
Just a writer.
I'm not like the nucleus of the
Mhm.
show. But like what I try to think of when the show, and season 5 especially, I try to. This show is basically at its heart a sitcom, but it's a sitcom that you can have fun with the complexity of it. So like when I'm thinking of an episode for the show, I try to think of like the most Frasier level sitcom idea mixed with the most like Ted Chiang or like Neil Gaiman or Grant Morrison level high concept sci-fi. And I think the sweet spot of this show is getting those really good sitcom comedy beats in the most open source form possible. So like, I can't talk about next season, but like, yeah, Glorzo is like, dude, where's my car with facehuggers. You try to just have like a low entry level idea that you've seen on a sitcom mixed with like high level. And then through that, you try to tell what's the meaning of life or what's the chaos of life, I guess. That from a writing perspective, I always try to come in low with some complexity on top of it.
Yeah, for the Glorzo, I think it's one of the bigger themes is violence.
Yes.
Like when we go overboard and like how we view violence and how we view the terrorist or whoever we deem as like an other or a villain.
Mm-hmm.
Especially
Absolutely.
since it's such an inverse of that, right? Because usually the invading parasite. Oh, you guys know this shit. Fuck me. Jeff, you should include yourself in the list of high concept people. You keep bringing up all these. You're the one creating high concept situations now.
It's your fault.
It was just something like, I think I was watching some Marvel movie or some Star Wars where I'm just like, did just 1 million people die in 5 seconds? You know, like I wanted to make fun of that sanitized form of violence, like Brian said, where like violence is never good. In fact, but like blockbuster movies, they kind of condition us to like, well, it's good because they were bad. It's like, well, in what war has there? I mean, like, there, you know, I wanted to humanize basically.
I also think it's a very American thing too, because like I was literally thinking about the fact how we like sex is like, oh my god, don't show kids some titties, but like, oh, you can show their heads blown off.
Yeah.
Well, it's like a European concept versus like American concept. Like Europeans are more okay with sex and nudity, and then Americans are a lot more like, oh no, oh my.
I was just talking with someone from IGN tonight who said that they can show heads blowing up in Doom on their videos, but can't talk about sex.
Yeah,
exactly.
Insanity.
Glorzo especially, like there's no the entire metaphor is that there is no metaphor and it's just the chaos of the 21st century.
But it's also interesting. Glorzo, we're also dealing with sex as well.
Yes,
The birthing sequence and like, is it too soon to have a child? Live your life for a while. Chill out. It's not a big deal. Don't rush.
That's what I kind of love Glorzo in the fact that like you can put a lot of metaphor onto it. Like it is like it's like American foreign policy, but it's also like like sex determinism. It's also about like empowerment, but it's also about exploitation when you're empowered. Like I love Summer's story in a way is almost like she's like Ms. Monopoly. Like she gets to succeed, but at the expense of Rick and Morty. And then like I think there's a lot of. It's an episode that I really loved how it's no one's clean in this episode. Like everyone,
the best part
like,
of that.
Like Rick and Morty are assholes, but then also, you know, they got fucked over by the Glorzos, but the Glorzos were trying their hardest, but at the end of the day, they are face-sucking parasites. Like it's a very, like, I'm really happy that the episode makes you feel a little gross because that's what it is to be American in the 21st century, right? Like there's no there's no escape from our complicity and our guilt, but what do you do with it? You know, what do you do with the fact that like we all have iPhones that are made by people who probably don't like making those iPhones for you, you know?
No, and African diamond mines.
Right.
Well, you're talking about how you can project upon the Glorzo any metaphor you see applicable to the real world, but I'm curious about the almost literal inverse in the decision to, because when they're in parasite mode, of course, you know, you want to showcase your star, but they all talk as their original host.
Yes.
How much of the personalities are meant to bleed through? Because something I enjoyed about this episode, and I think I also enjoyed about like the Citadel of Rick's episode, is there's big swaths of it that even though we're hearing the same voices, it's new characters.
Yeah.
Well, incest.
Yeah, that was a part. I'm surprised.
It's indirect
so much
incest
coming up. Yeah, indirect incest.
Like with the condom.
That was a big part of the
Just wait.
episode. I wanted.
Just wait. Hold on.
I wanted to. That was a place like in the midst of all this violence. I wanted to give like a Romeo and Juliet or like a Giovanni's Room or some like 1984, like some small romance in the middle of all the carnage, because no one wins in these situations. And I just wanted to. Yeah, I just thought it was very
it's a tragedy. Ultimately, it's a tragedy.
Yeah, it's a tragedy, and like because everyone was an asshole, and it's including the Glorzos, you know, they're both kind of assholes, but they found this small release through love and connection. But it was too late. Like that, isn't that just a call for all of us to like, you know, enjoy the love you have while you have it, and don't let the world break it from you. That's my take. That's old. Yeah, that's this rooster's take.
That's his take.
Eat shit.
That rooster.
Some call.
You're on the line with the Rick and Morty Companion Podcast. We're talking rooster.
Hi, it's the same caller again. I had a follow-up question, I guess, from Jeff's answer, if it's okay.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
He said it was like a sitcom or something, and I felt like, at least America, there's always been like one big cartoon sitcom, right? Before there was like Simpsons, and then there was like Family Guy, right? And I don't know to disrespect, of course, they're great shows too, but you know,
And Stones, come on.
better. But would it be fair to make that comparison, but instead of like now like way all the way through, like steps through like to infinity, and that's sort of like where it's just going off with it now? And is that a fair comparison?
I mean, that's very kind of you to say. Like, I can only speak for my take on the show, but that's where I'm at. Like, I felt like I was writing Simpsons like season 5 or so. I just wanted to. I love The Simpsons so much. It's my favorite thing. But like, I found this show. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, since I've been on the show since the pilot, so longer than just about anyone.
Yeah.
The implication that Justin and Dan had when they started on the show was that it was supposed to be a family sitcom with crazy sci-fi like on top of it. So the sitcom formula was always built into the cake. And Simpsons was definitely a big reference, though at the time we were trying not to hire people who had worked on the Simpsons because he didn't want it to look like the Simpsons. So at least visually, we want this. Yeah, we want the aesthetic to at least feel different. But you know, I mean, Dan's world is also a sitcom world, so he definitely understands the implication of like he doesn't want to do the same tropes over and over again, and he wants to use those tropes to say something new about our society. I think that comes across quite a lot of people like Rick and Morty. So.
Yeah. I think, and from like just a writer perspective, coming into a show that was popular, existing, you know, I came on season 4 and 5. I think I looked at it as the way, whereas The Simpsons explains what it is to be like an American family around like in its prime, you know, like 1989 to about 1999. South Park represents what it's like to be kind of like a shithole libertarian kid in like late 90s or mid 2000s. Family Guy is just like extemporaneous, like everything. I found Rick and Morty to be like, yeah, it's sitcom, but it's also postmodernism. It's it's like the excess economy, to where like you can do anything at Rick and Morty. Not even like Simpsons, South Park. There's different flavors to it. Yes. Rick and Morty, you can do limitless things, but you have to also ground it in a sitcom. So I found it to be, as a writer, it's like a really beautiful challenge of like you need to have relatable things, but now you have a limitless canvas. You know, you just don't have to do Principal Skinner stories, but you can do like your Simpson Principal Skinner stuff, but now you just have the world basically. So it's a really hard challenge, but kind of beautiful too. But yeah, I hope and like, you know, Simpsons is something so dear to my heart, but that's a nice thing to say. Thank you.
But Rick and Morty is like a really big sandbox, basically.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, man?
That was a great answer. I just wanted to make a comment on it if I could. There's like a math joke, right, where there's only 3 numbers. There's 0, 1, and infinity. And if Simpsons was a 0 and Family Guy is a 1, I feel like Rick and Morty has really been taking the mantle on like bringing it to infinity, like really, really beautifully.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, that's a team effort. Yeah, it's all been really fun.
Well, they could just get a bunch of compliments, I guess.
Beautiful.
As an old guy, I'm like, are we just forgetting the Flintstones?
What about the Jetsons?
It came after, yeah.
Justice League Unlimited from the '90s X-Men cartoon for me is my.
Yeah, I heard you last time. You were correct.
Also good.
Yeah,
Batman rules.
Yes.
If you're just tuning in, I don't know
You
why
see
you
my
would be.
Batman back there, Brian?
Oh.
Nice.
406
Jeff
Morty
Snow
is-
original.
We're talking with some of the people behind it. We've got Michelle Rhee, background designer, Kendra Milton, character designer, director Brian Newton, and Jeff Loveness, who wrote it. 708-794-6386. Got a
Call
more
anytime.
minutes for some calls. So True Pornhub learns your kinks if you have an account.
Where did that come from? That was, I think that was a last minute. That joke got longer and longer. At first, it was in the cold open of just like, oh, the algorithm learns your preferences. I think that was just me. And then either Justin or Dan, it just like the joke kept going.
I remember the first draft of that didn't have that extra bit, like conceding, like, all right, I'm sold. That wasn't in. Like, that came like maybe the third draft in.
I think so, yeah. That's a lesson to the other writer who called in. Like, I've learned that it's been a humbling experience for me too, is like, you pitch a joke and then like you get that joke, you get that laugh, but then there's always another zig you can have or another connection, and then the art team brings in an extra layer to it. So like, get those ideas on the page, but open yourself to the possibility that there's better jokes and there's better versions and there's better journeys for it.
Nothing's precious. Like you guys mentioned last week with the Story Train episode, that whole coronavirus bit, like we saw that last week. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I read every version of that episode. It's like, now we're that topical.
People are working on Sunday's episode now, presumably, right? This coming Sunday. Is that possible?
The odds are likely.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then,
Not you
like,
guys.
that Corona thing, and then on the flip side of that, I wrote that monologue about capitalism in like April of 2019. And yet, and even when I wrote it, I'm like, oh, is anyone going to care? It's like, oh, whatever. But then like that week is the week with all that coronavirus, like, let's get people back to work. It doesn't matter if they die kind of ethos.
Yeah.
And I was thinking like, holy shit. I wrote that Rick monologue about the bleeding jaws of capitalism April 2019, and then this week it suddenly becomes very relevant.
But that's a buttress like what Kendra said about like telling things are like to you, and these are just observations you had about the world that you put into the script. It turns out you've noticed some things about our society.
They've been singing about this since the 70s. There's nothing new. It's just
I think with animation especially, like, it does take so long to make this stuff. So try to hit something timeless that you can. Don't make like Kofefe jokes and stuff like that, because it'll be done in 10 weeks.
Kendra,
it's kind of hard for teenagers though.
Yeah.
When designing a parasite, were you flapping together, and any time when you guys are doing something that is kind of, this is a reflection of a trope or an idea or a genre, how do you try and differentiate yourself? Like, what's your first instinct when giving them a design to be like, this is a face hugger that's, it's a face hugger, but it's not fucking Alien, it's not this?
Well, I mean, this isn't specific to your question, it's kind of adjacent to your question. While we were creating these specific, like the Glorzos, there was this whole thing about, should they have claws? Should they have like, nails coming out of the feet and the hands, and there was a whole thing, and Justin was like, oh my god, but then they're monsters, but they need to just be like fungus. So like we kind of went more with like a cordyceps direction. If you know what cordyceps are, they're like a type of fungus. And so you'll notice in some of like the special poses and like the way they give birth that a lot of the little dangly bits that are on them are actually growing as they birth. So the cordyceps are basically fungi. And so as they're giving birth, they get bigger and then they pop.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's really
cool. So that's like a little thing that you probably don't notice, but if you go back and you look, a lot of them are growing. So they're like fungus instead of monsters.
Yeah, okay.
Well, it was like they didn't want it to be monsters per se. They wanted it to be more like this is growth. And if it was to like, if they took it off, maybe it would come back out, So like they could suck it back in. Whereas like if they became more monstrous, like maybe they couldn't convert back into their normal original selves. That got talked about at some point throughout the process, but like during a lot of special poses we'd be like, wow.
This episode actually went through a lot of design while we were boarding it. So like the initial concept of the Glorzo, they were always going to be facehuggers and kind of like starfish-esque because of Starro.
Right.
But there's one initial design, they were always going to have one eye, but initially they had no mouth. So we actually boarded half the episode with no mouth Glorzo. So when they talk, it'd just be like Optimus Prime, or just like the sacks jiggling, and that's about it. Then I remember at one point Justin wanted to see mouths on top of them, so it's like, okay, now we have to go with mouths. And then that's when there's still kind of fungi growth coming out of the host body, and then like, all right, no more fungi growth, then you have to do that. So it's like and like another conceit to this episode, I think Jeff may have talked about before, is that we were trying to use as much reuse as possible because it was such a heavy episode, specifically on backgrounds, but also just on animation and chaos. So we reused a bunch of like previous alien designs, and then there's someone like outside jetting down my highway. That's fine. And so we used a lot of the similar alien designs, and then just attached the Glorsos on top of that to reuse and save on design and animation. And then we had to make the conceit like, all right, are they going to transform into monsters? No. Are they going to have fungal growth? Not initially. So then we just added mouse to the other two characters. So things evolve in this medium, especially on this show.
Yeah, they evolve and then they simplify. I think that this was a marriage of like art and writing to where we realize, and this is perpetually my mistake. I throw so much in there, and like in the guise of like, oh yeah, Rick and Morty, it's a complex show. Let's throw a lot in here. But I think as much as you can simplify, then the clarity comes through. And like, we took out that entire middle life stage. Yeah. We took out we took out the fungi. It's like, no, just make them simple creatures, and then the simplicity of that.
I'll say this for the record. I initially was like, you guys sure you want that?
Yeah, I do too. That's always I need to like pitch something and take it down 3, and like that's what I'm really trying to get at. It's my perpetual lesson of just like keep it simple, and then it's much more efficient.
In some of these episodes, have A plots and B plots, or last week had A through Z plots, I guess. But in this one, it was more of like there was one main world and one main setting and one main vibe. And how, Brian, does that affect divvying up the work? Because I feel like last week they were talking about, oh yeah, we have all these flashbacks and side flashes. We have different board artists on different scenes. But you have to kind of create a consistency, maybe? Does that change your process a little?
Another episode I directed last season, which was Vindicator 3, had a similar, it had no B plot in that episode. And what I learned from that episode is that was actually one of the harder episodes for the animation and design crew to do, because normally when we cut to a B plot, we return to a familiar setting, something that's reused, either like the school or the house, so we can like kind of like ease off on backgrounds, ease off on new characters. But that episode was 24 minutes of all new locations and all new characters, so it's a lot.
And so Ant-Man.
Oh God, Ant-Man.
That was mainly what
Million Ants.
Million Ant-Man for sure.
We can talk about that one. We should just for your podcast record, we should do back issues at some point. But for Glorzo, we were trying to reuse incidental characters for the Glorzos, the Glorzo host. But then the backgrounds are totally new. So that first half, I think the only reused background is literally the kitchen.
Yeah.
in this episode. Yeah.
Oh,
And I guess like when they
the ending. Yeah, the ass shot. Yeah.
Yeah, everything is totally new on this, which just eats up so much time and eats up so much money. And like you were mentioning like Vance and the others before, just every time they come into me and talk about like a new background, I could just see like the despair.
The fear in their eyes.
yeah. It's just like, do we have to do this? Like giant hands and all this action sequences that I think it was Samantha, Eugene, and Douglas Olson had all that sequence, and they had to redo that several times. They did an amazing job, and the backgrounds look amazing too. Just these are things
go nuts.
Yeah, that's an artist go nuts situation. These are things when you're working on like a high concept show that's an action show that usually bumps up the count a lot. Most traditional animation sitcoms, if you notice, like Family Guy and even Simpsons to a degree, is more of like simple staging and like reuse of like Quagmire's house, Peter's front lawn, the interior of the living room. So you're reusing locations over and over again. That is not a conceit of Rick and Morty.
Yeah, especially for this episode. Yeah, it was like you did the first pass, then you had to do the second pass where it gets destroyed. And I think a lot of us use that energy to really destroy that city. Just go to town at it.
Yeah, I wish we could just give you guys like lead torches and sledgehammers. It probably
such guilt. I have such guilt.
Well, and also on top of that, despite us using like some of the people from like the Spa Planet, and I think we used a race from like HeistCon from this season as well, like it might be reused, but like none of that was reused. We had to redress everything so much that they were new designs. So there was really no reuse, even in character.
Because a lot of people don't know Rick and Morty is a digital animated show. That we have to create rigs. So anytime a new character shows up, we have to rig them, construct them, and then construct them digitally.
I'm pretty sure we did 14-point turns on the Glorzo and like an up view where it's like just normal and like the head's like and then I also did one where it's on the ground and there's a 360 of it spinning. So character did a lot of work too.
But there's not somebody telling you to do this, right? This is you guys deciding you want to do this.
Well, no, we have to do it so that the
job
for the animators, because the animators don't get to like just make it up as they go. Like they need assets to work off of.
But Matt's saying, what if you guys just decided you're only doing 10-point turns from now on? Will Justin ever know?
Usually that's part of the negotiation process between the creators and production. And the artist side, we usually fall on the production side. And once they make those decisions, they want to see these things.
You guys have an unbelievable work ethic across the board.
We have amazing.
You should see it. I can't believe how hard all of our team has been working during COVID. Like, it's amazing. Like, you guys should see all the season 5 stuff we're working on. It's badass, man. Like, you're gonna have your minds blown.
Can you show us 8 pixels?
I can't show you any pixel.
Or is it easier to be on your own?
I think it's kind of similar. It's really not super different because even at work, you get your assignments, you go off and you just kind of work in your own little space for a while and then you submit it. So honestly, for artists, this isn't really affecting us too hard, fortunately. But at the same time, like considering everything that's weighing on everyone's minds, like I'm so impressed with our team and how hard they've been working and how many hours they've been putting in and how much amazing work I'm seeing. Like I cannot, like, everything our team is doing is just fucking hands down amazing, and I'm so proud of everyone.
Okay.
Specifically for design, because they don't get a break. I can attest to that.
We don't get a break. Everybody else gets breaks. We don't get breaks.
There it is.
We got one last caller. What's up? Your last question of the night on the phone on the Rick and Morty Companion Podcast. We're talking about turning.
Hey guys, I was just kind of wondering, what percentage of the creative process is really trying to push the envelope with the show and, break sort of the character stereotypes and move the story forward in new and inventive ways.
Yeah. I think this episode is a good example of the last episode, like Story Train, is a completely narratively broken experimental episode. And this episode, I would argue, like even as me, like the writer, I'm like, okay, we did a pretty like crazy meta one. Let's just do a solid like A to Z adventure. But then it's like, well, people have seen the A to Z adventures, like the simple like Purge Planet or the those A to Z stories. So we thought, okay, what's a new way to do what's a way to do a classic adventure, but to subvert it and to throw it on its head and do like non-linear stuff. So I think it's a constant. Like you want to give people what I don't know. You always have to push it a little bit, and you because the minute you stop pushing it, then people will say the show is dead or the show hasn't explored things. So I don't know, man. It's always just about like hitting what you like and experimenting and pushing, and then making sure you do a Pearl Harbor instead of a 9/11. I guess as you try to find the balance. But yeah, it's always just about pushing it.
I actually have an interesting question for you, Jeff, is the fact that you came up to the show season 4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like you had seen the show before you came on, so you had an expectation before going in. That's unique compared to like some of us who've been on and we just don't have any expectation. We're just
right,
like, this is the show and this is what we do. And like when we put on the artist side, at least on the board side, I would speak to that. It's like when we push the boundaries, it's just like what we think is funny and what is funny to us. And like if we're grossed out or if we're like think something's like juvenile or over the top or funny, we will try to put that in because we think that's what the audience might respond to as well.
Yeah. I think from as being like a fan of the show coming in here, but also at the very same time a new writer and supposed to you have the responsibility of putting in a new perspective and new blood. I think it was a part of me of like I've done this a lot with Rick too. There's a side of Rick that I kind of love, the weird emotional side of Rick, or I like Rick opening up to Morty like when they're shooting everybody, or I like Rick asking Morty to give him a little kiss in the last episode, like the train thing. I think I wanted to come in because I think there are some there's some fans of the show or there's some images of the show. I often
forget that that's his grandfather, so like a little emotional moment between a family member is like
I think my contribution to the show is just adding a little bit of odd Rick emotion to it, like in the fact that the show has gone on for many years now, so I wanted Rick to like strangely open up to his grandson, or I just wanted to, I think as a writer you want to do what works well, but you also, much like Kendra was saying with art, you want to bring in your own perspective. So like me, there's a lot of Bible references and 90s X-Men in there ever since I came in. So.
Rick and Morty number 406, Promortyus. There you have it. We know everything about it. Michelle, Kendra, Brian, Jeff, thank you guys for coming on. Go watch the episode if you haven't watched it. Now you spoiled everything.
You spoiled everything. Jesus.
Dan, this song is incredible. This is a very late edition, right? Didn't we have cameo or something?
Yeah, I think it was Dan O'Connor wanted that.
We're going to be back next Monday at 10 at the Adult Swim app. Stick around because we're moments away from Fan Fiction Showdown. Thanks again, guys, for coming on.
What was it, scrambled eggs? I hope they love the Fan Fiction show, Matt.
Yeah, it's Frasier tonight. Thanks, guys, for coming on. Rick and Morty 406 Promortyus. We'll see you next week on the Rick and Morty Companion Podcast live.